So, ladies and gentlemen, before we go on with the stream, let's talk a little bit about my idea on how to improve the Dead by Daylight gameplay. Now, many people have come out with their 2 cents and their opinions on how to improve game balance, because as you all know, balance is where this game's at its weakest right now. The game designers, in many people's opinions, aren't doing a great job at balancing the game, especially for higher level players. As far as I'm concerned, it looks like they're balancing the game from the top up rather than from the bottom up rather than the top down, and that's not what you want. Because when you look at other games like Valorant and Counter-Strike and League of Legends, it's always based on the best players. They take the best players and they go from there. They figure out what needs to be changing based on what good players are doing and not what inexperienced players are doing. Now, you may argue, Dead by Daylight is not meant to be competitive. It's nothing like the games you just mentioned. And so for this game in particular, all you said has no bearing. Well, I kind of disagree, because on the other hand, you have a game with ranks, you have a game with MMR, which again is also arguably not needed. So if you want to keep MMR, and it looks like the devs do, then at least balance the game. Because again, you could make the argument, right? You could say, oh, well, DBD isn't supposed to be balanced. It's not supposed to be competitive. Then why is there MMR? Why is there SPMM? So there's the catch, right? It's like the devs, they want to have MMR and matchmaking and put sweaty players against sweaty players. But I'm of the opinion that if you want to force that, then you kind of need a game which is a bit more balanced. So here's my idea. How do you go about doing this? This is also a question I get a lot. Many people keep asking me, how would you improve the game? How would you improve the game? What would you do? What would be the first thing you do? So let's not get into perks, okay? Let's not get into, I would buff this perk, I would nerf this perk, I would buff this killer, I would nerf this killer, I would buff this survivor, I would nerf this. I don't want to get into that today, okay? Today is not about specific perks, although you could talk about Pain Resonance, Pop, Noed, Adrenaline, Decisive, Off the Records, Deliverance. You could talk about all these things and how healthy or unhealthy these perks are overall. That's not the scope of this. This is a more general idea. It's more of a generic take on how to make the gameplay loop a bit more interesting, but most importantly, a bit less based on tunneling. So, how is the game balanced right now? So the way the game is balanced right now, or unbalanced, you could say, a high level, is that the killer, in order to beat or have a chance at beating a good team, they need to eliminate a survivor as soon as possible. That's the main thing you want to do, no matter what tier killer you're playing. But most importantly, if you don't play a very high tier killer, you want to tunnel someone out and go for them 3 times in a row, kill them as soon as possible to alleviate the gen pressure, to get the gens to slow down just slightly, right? Now, why is it, though? Why have we got to a situation where such a gameplay is commonplace and necessary? Because I don't think it's very fun or very healthy for the game if the most efficient way to play is to get someone killed ASAP. It doesn't sound like good design. Think about it. Like, you spawn in as killer, and the best way to win is just to go for the same person until they're dead. And there's no better chance you have at winning that match. I don't like that. And I think many other people share the same feeling. Like, it would be great to have a few alternatives to tunneling, which are maybe not as viable, because I don't think anything can be as viable as a tunnel, but something that can at least be nearly as good. Maybe 3/4 the way, all right? We're trying to figure out how you accomplish that. So before you understand how to accomplish that, you have to ask yourself a very simple question. How do I make it so killing a survivor isn't absolutely necessary? How do I alleviate gen speed or gen efficiency without necessarily killing survivor? Because if the answer is killing a survivor, then I'm always going to want to camp and tunnel or proxy camp. I'm always going to want to kill a survivor early if that's the best way to play. We need an alternative, right? We need an appetizing alternative to go for different survivors and at the same time not just forfeit the game. AKA, you shouldn't be completely throwing if you're not tunneling. A killer who's getting quick chases in succession, and so who is, in other words, outplaying the survivors, they should have a decent chance at winning without having to tunnel just because the opponent so happened to be good at the game. So how do you do this? Easier said than done. Many people have had various ideas. Mine in particular is this, as follows. So, you get into a chase with a survivor. You down them, okay? You hook them. Once the survivor gets unhooked by any means, they suffer from a penalty. Now, I like to call this the entity scar, okay? So if you want to think about lore, how this would tie into the lore. So basically, when they get on the hook, the entity applies a kind of wound, a special kind of wound, which gives them a big debuff. So once this guy gets off the hook, he's gonna have a massive debuff. Well, not a massive debuff, but he has a debuff of some sort, which needs to be determined. We don't know exactly how severe or how long this needs to be. But this debuff needs to make the survivor repair gens slower. Because if they're repairing gens slower, then they're gonna be a less appetizing target. Think about it this way. You know how when you're playing Pig and you drop a trap on someone, you want to let that guy go because he's not going to be doing gens. He's going to be going to a box to get rid of his trap. So in other words, he's not going to be a very useful survivor for a few minutes at least, if you're lucky, that is. But the gist of it is that now the survivor that just got saved off the hook is less of a threat because his gens are going to be way slower. They're going to be way slower than another guy's gens. So the idea here is to then go for someone else, aka not tunnel, to then slow down the other guy with the entity scar. So what you're doing is you're rotating hooks and you're applying entity scar to as many survivors as you can to slow down every survivor. Because if you slow them down, their gens will be significantly less quick instead of going for one person. So if you still choose to tunnel, that option is available to you, although you'll have to deal with decisive and off the record and body blocks and insta-heals and all that shit. So you'll be sacrificing gen speed for a kill. So even if you do get the kill, gens will be popping quicker because you won't have this debuff. So the alternative is to mix hooks. You can bring regression perks if you want as well. But any survivor who gets saved will, as I said, have this debuff for X amount of time. Now obviously, if your chases take too long, eventually the buff will wear off. So they'll start doing gens at regular speed again. But that's because you have to keep up the pace. Your chases need to be efficient. You can't just get away with one good chase and then have a bad chase, a bad chase, a bad chase. You have to be somewhat consistent across the board. So similar to Gift of Pain, but Gift of Pain isn't nearly as good as it needs to be. But that's kind of the idea. So no, the scar wouldn't last forever. It would last for a set amount of time that needs to be determined. So it could be 1 minute, 2 minutes, depending on, like, you would have to go through a PTB, obviously, to determine exactly where the sweet spot is. But the basic idea is to give the killer a good reason not to tunnel and allow them to gain slowdown on the team without necessarily going for a kill. Because right now, I think the only way you can get true debuff is just to kill a survivor. You have to kill a survivor. There's no other way. Pain res is nice, but it's not enough. Pop is nice, but it's not enough. You still want to tunnel. To make the killer not want to tunnel, I think it's a decent idea to go for. Because on the other hand, if the first survivor you go for gets a good chase, and you get them eventually, but it's taking them long, so you're going to be losing gens in the process. So by the time the first guy is debuffed, you will still have lost significant progress. So you want to keep those chases quick. But if you can apply slowdowns to more than one survivor at the same time and start juggling, now you have a situation where gens are going slower. Think of it as like a pentimento effect of sorts. Now, of course, the second one survivor gets sacrificed and the game becomes a 3v1, now the system is completely removed because now it's a 3v1. And in a 3v1 situation, you really don't need any help because you've already killed that first survivor. It's only a problem when every survivor is alive. It's that 4v1 phase which is the most delicate and where the killer is at his weakest. The killer goes from pretty weak to pretty OP as soon as the first survivor dies. So again, once the first guy gets sacrificed, boom, the effect goes away and it's just back to normal gameplay. So there you go. I think now, of course, there may be a few holes in my reasoning. There may be a few things to fine-tune here and there, but I think the basic idea is good. I think the basic idea is an interesting one. And if you elaborate it further, and if you find out the right timing, and the right percentage of the slowdown, I think it could be a good direction to send the game in. Now, on the other hand, I'm sure many people will say, oh no, your idea is bad. What about solo queue? Dude, let's talk about solo queue. Solo queue will always be bad because you're not playing with friends. You've got no communication. No one cares about each other, basically. You'll have someone run Clairvoyance and play for Hatch. You'll have someone else cleanse a totem, not do any gens. So let's just put that to bed for a sec. Let's just agree on one thing, that solo queue will never be good. Solo queue will always be a random experience where you may have a few good games, but very, very many bad and disappointing games and very frustrating games. So it's not a question of you can't do this, you can't have this good idea, you can't have that good idea. Who cares? Solo queue will never be good. You remember how people used to think? People used to say, oh, when they introduced the HUD icons, the solo queue experience will improve because now everyone can see icons on what people are doing. Did anything change? Not really, hardly anything changed. We still get bad games in solo, icons or no icons. But I remember how everyone was so adamant and so convinced that just a few silly icons would somehow improve their experience. Absolutely not. Because again, it's not the point. The point is Swift is always going to be far superior. And you have to address that. You have to address it. You can't just use solo queue being bad as an excuse to never implement any decent ideas. Because that's another way of giving up. That's like just completely giving up and saying, okay, I'm okay with how the game is. Even though the game's imbalanced, this is okay. And let's just have more of the same. Do we really want more of this? Do we really want a DPD where tunneling is so mandatory? I don't think so. I still think it would be a better idea, despite the people complaining about solo, to just go ahead and try to start experimenting with these things, okay? Now again, there's other good ideas as well. My idea isn't the only idea, but it's one of them. It's one of them. So let me know what you think. If you're watching this on YouTube, in the comments down below, if you want to throw in your 2 cents. If you want to point out any, anything maybe I forgot about or some things that we didn't mention. But I think as a basic framework, right? As a basic framework, if you de-incentivize, if you give the killer a valid, and I say valid alternative to killing a survivor early, I think that's where you start to have a more healthy gameplay loop. And a gameplay loop which is I think more interesting and more enjoyable. So that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.